Hello. In this mini course of 4 sessions, we will talk about women's Midrash that I was collecting and still collecting for the last 20 years and these days too as well. And we will talk about this contribution to our Jewish thought and the need of this new thought. I would like to share with you just for a few minutes how this whole thing began, and then today we will read a few midrashim to get to know really why we needed them so much. And in the next sessions we will deal with midrashim that were written recently, the last year of war, by different Israeli women. So why Midrash in the 2000s? So Midrash, as most of us know, is a specific genre of commentary of the scriptures, and the reason for coming up with new explanations, stories, commentary began as the rabbis didn't even decided which books will be in the Bible, but in those days of trying to codify the Bible, different rabbis felt uncomfortable with different stories, with some of the theology in the Bible, and of course with different laws. And the way they invented to deal with still relating to these scriptures as holy and to sanctify them while they're not totally comfortable with some of the things in them, was that they invented Midrash, which opens the story or different words or different laws and interpret them in a different way than the pshat, than the clear, easy way of understanding the text is. So what they did in their days, 2,000 years ago and more, was a revolution. They invented this way of reading something in a different way than that it really should be read or simply read. And by that, adding their beliefs or agenda to the Jewish thought. They would say those midrashim in the shuls, in wherever, in Beit Midrash, where people studied, and said that the real meaning is not really the simple meaning that we see, but other meaning. And that enabled them to develop Judaism to the next stage, to a Judaism that they can live with. So Jews are not like the Karaites, the Karaim, that follow only the Tanakh as it is. The rabbis decided that to be Jewish is really to think about the Bible and to reinterpret it again and again and enable it to live in different generations with different concepts that change all the time. So the rabbis did this revolution in their days, and we have their thought in all the Torah Shebe'al Peh world and the oral Torah. And recently, since women joined Beit Midrash in the 60s in America, in the 70s or 80s in Israel, women that spent time in different Beit Midrash, either Beit Midrash for women only, or in all those open, liberal Beit Midrash of men and women together, studying secular and religious people together, more liberal places around the world, women learned how to use this vehicle of Midrash to make room to express their thoughts and their understandings. Why is it so important? Because all Jewish text ever was written by men, for men, expressing, bringing to view the experience of being a man in our world, in especially our Jewish world, agendas of men. And most of it, I think, was from goodwill, most of it. But the experience of being a woman and a Jewish woman wasn't there. Even when the men do write about women, usually or all the time, they write from their perspective of or imagination, what is it that women experience and feel in their bodies, in their souls. So we really lack 51% of Jewish experience in our holy texts, in our sanctified texts. And recently, this last century that women study, they started writing and doing the same revolution that the rabbis did 2,000 years ago, expressing themselves and changing or reading from scratch the text and adding their agenda or their perspectives or their calls, their moral demands or cries through Midrash. So how did I find that phenomena? Is a fantastic story. I was myself in a horrible crisis between my feminism and my Jewishness. As long as I studied more and more Jewish text in my 20s, really horrible crisis. And I had a sort of a revelation. I found a little publication by Rivka Lubitch that we will read one of her midrashim today. She published years ago a little notebook with midrashim that she imitates Chazal with the genre of how to write a midrash. But she wrote it with criticism on different things and ideas, new ideas of how stories really worked in the Bible from her perspective. And when I read it, I was so confused. It looked so authoritative or holy for me, but it was new thing. And I realized that this is our responsibility. This is the call for us to do this next revolution, or just to add the next stage of Jewish text. That in our world now, men and women seek to hear from women. So I found that a few other women write, and later on, a friend that noticed that phenomena too joined me. Nechama means Weingarten. And we collected more and more midrashim, went together to Yediot Achronot, the biggest publishing house in Israel, and offered them to publish a new Jewish text, which will be women's midrash. Israeli women, really from all denominations, ages, backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, secular, ultra-Orthodox, unbelievable. They liked the idea, Yediot Achronot, and we worked editing these pieces for 2 years. And in 2009, published the first Hebrew volume of Dirshuni, which was accepted in an ambivalent way, you can imagine, in 2009. Some wrote in the book reviews that this is it, finally, the new stage of more equal Judaism, where women can be heard and shape Judaism. And others wrote that this is the beginning of the end, and there was a halachic psak ruling that one can't carry it at home. And even though there are many verses there, you should throw it to the garbage, not even to a gniza. But it didn't harm the sellings. The sellings were fantastic. And I started receiving emails from people that studied it in different shuls, Batei Midrash. They sent me the Dapei Mekorot, the source sheets, where the midrashim from Dirshuni were thought to be like one of the other quotes of other Jewish texts. And that was a fantastic period. We moved my family to America, to Boston, for 8 years. And in those 8 years, I taught the first volume of Dirshuni in different rabbinical schools. I really reached rabbinical students of all denominations except maybe ultra-Orthodox, but modern Orthodox rabbinical schools did enjoy classes of Dirshuni. And I started receiving more and more midrashim by women. It was really a flood. Dozens of new Israeli women sent me their pieces because they saw me as me and Nechama as those that can publish their pieces. So Nechama couldn't work with me on the second volume, and in America I worked hard on editing the second volume of Dirshuni and published it in Hebrew in Israel. And this time it was accepted with so much love and easy. There was hardly any criticism. Feminism changes rapidly everywhere. And in America, there was a lot of pressure on me to publish an English volume. So Brandeis University Press were glad to work on an English volume of Dirshuni. And this book is a little different than the Hebrew ones. It has only 50 pieces, but with a lot of commentary that really can help understand the background for each midrash. Because women write about various topics, not only women's status in halacha, but also about feminist theology after the Holocaust, about their troubles in the family or in the rabbinical courts, or other midrashim that has nothing to do with women, just midrash like the rabbis. So we will start now studying a few midrashim to get the feeling, and next time when we meet, like I said, we will read midrashim that were written recently in the last year. But now we will begin with the earlier years of Dirshuni. The first midrash that we will read today was written by Miri Westreich, and it has to do with the creation of women. So much of the humiliation that women feel regarding their status in the Bible has to do with creating the woman second, etc. So she's playing here and doing an interesting thing with Adam naming the woman, and she notices, like others, that Adam named the woman twice, the woman that was created through him. And she learns from this something very, very interesting about the process that men go through when their feminist thought evolves, or noticing women's experiences and changing their mind about women. So let's read together the Midrash and explain it. So the Midrash is named, this one will be called Woman. First we read, every time the letters will be on the side like this, it means this is a verse. It's an original text, biblical text. And Adam called out names for all the livestock and the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field, but for Adam there wasn't a helping match to be found. This is after God asks Adam to be involved somehow in the creation by naming all the animals in order to find Adam a match, because God noticed that Adam is lonely. Adam didn't notice that he's lonely. It was God that noticed that. Maybe God was projecting of himself on Adam, I don't know. But by asking Adam to call all the animals' names, calling a name is really noticing the essence of someone. So Adam is going through all living creatures and doesn't find anyone that really speaks to him and can be his match. So these dots were skipping a few verses, and God put slumber on Adam. Adam is having this surgery that the woman is created from his body, and is brought in front of him. And Adam that sees her, I continue reading, and Adam said, "This one is it, bone of my bones, self of myself, flesh of my flesh. This one will be called woman, for she was taken from a man." So what do Adam see, and what essence does he see in the woman, naming her? He sees actually himself. She's a part of him. So he will name her after himself. So on the one hand, it's beautiful that because it's the first time he names himself. So through seeing her, she's like a mirror. He actually names himself too. He says about himself that he's a man. But he names her after himself because what he sees in her is kind of an echo, or he sees part of himself. And now Miri's Midrash begins. And he woke from slumber and saw a self of his self, bone of his bones. And he was hurrying to complete the work of assigning names, male and female, and said, "This one will be called woman, for she was taken from a man." And the woman saw how he was saying taken from a man, that she's a part and not a creature in her own right. So first of all, we hear about the woman's experience, realizing that she's not being treated as a person for herself, but so what does it do to yourself when all your life you're being treated as belong to someone else? You're there for someone else, not a creature with your own special name. And the serpent gazed into her, added a prohibition, craftily opening Adam's sleepy eyes, and at the end of this opening, curses, crawling dirt, childbirth pain, sweat of brows. So the serpent noticed maybe Isha, the woman's hurt or vulnerability. He adds the prohibition. He tells her, he lies to her. He says, God said you shouldn't eat from any of the trees. And of course, she claims, no, that's not true, only from a specific tree, and the whole thing we know. And it ends with the curses forever and ever, for each of them separately, a different punishment. And Adam sees 3 curses: serpent, woman, man, and understands separate curse, separate flesh, separate bone, and selfhood. This one is not just bone of my bones, self of myself, flesh of my flesh. This one is helping match to me. At that moment, the work of calling out names was complete. So something went over Adam as he realizes that through the curses, the woman is different from him. She has different capabilities than him. She can give birth. She'll suffer, but his role is maybe different, or capabilities or strengths. So I'll read the end of the Midrash. And Adam called the name of his woman Eve, Chava, for she was the mother of all the living, Em Kol Chai. So now Adam is giving her a second name. This one is not a name that has to do with him at all. It has to do with her unique essence, maybe. I don't know. I don't like essentialism so much. But something that she has that he doesn't, that she will be the mother of children, of humanity. And he realizes that she is different. She's not just a part of him. She is there for herself. And I wish there was another verse saying that in that moment he understood that he should be a helping match for her too. But that would be maybe in a different midrash, or I don't know. So This midrash shows us how women, it's just one example of dealing with very painful feelings that rises from the patriarchal Bible that we have, and how by gently notices different things, you can change a little bit the angle of reading it and actually get some strength by this. This midrash, at least for me, gives the belief and the hope that men do go through a process, that they can understand us and see us in a different way as their conscious, their feminist conscious is growing. The second midrash is very different, and it has to do with the phenomena of mamzerut, mamzerim. Who are mamzerim? I will explain immediately. But it's mamzerut is a mitzvah. That is given to us in the Bible, and the results of that mitzvah are horrible, 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 especially in our days. So what is it? Maybe we'll read the beginning of the midrash, and then I will explain the whole phenomena and why this midrash is written. And maybe I will just begin with the fact that the person who wrote this midrash is Rivka Lubitch. Rivka Lubitch is used to be a to'enet rabbanit. It's an advocate in rabbinical court. This job wasn't open to women most years that the state exists and rabbinical courts are there. But there was a lot of pressure to enable women, and in the last, I think, maybe 20 years, women can finally function, represent women or families in rabbinic court. It's not easy because the laws that runs rabbinic court are still very, very patriarchal, and most of the dayanim, the judges, are ultra-Orthodox. Some of them keep shmirat einayim. They don't look at women, so you can represent a woman and talk to the judge, but he won't look at both of you, only at the to'en rabbani, at the guy that represents the men. He would look at them only. But the women advocates are trying their best, the to'anot rabbaniyot, and Rivka did this for years and met unbelievable, horrible cases. And one of the things that she noticed was that mamzerim is an awful issue in rabbinic courts. So let's begin to read her midrash and explain what this phenomena is. The name of the midrash is the Assembly of God, Kal Hashem. In the Beit Midrash of Bruria, they stuck a sword and said, Halacha, a mamzer will come into the assembly of God. And what of the verse, no mamzer will come into the assembly of God? So, strange beginning of a midrash, let's explain it. In Deuteronomy, there's a verse saying that a mamzer cannot join the people of Israel. And there is no explanation in the place what a mamzer is. And there isn't in the Bible any explanation of what the mamzer is. Around this verse, there are other verses that talks about different things, different prohibitions really. And the rabbis in the oral Torah are discussing what can a mamzer be. Some offer that it's someone muzar, mamzer from muzar, someone that has a different body. Others say mamzer is from zar, from a different nation, because one of the verses around this talks about people from other nations. And there is another idea that mamzer will be the offsprings, the children that are being born from incest. Unfortunately, this is the explanation that the rabbis agreed upon. And what it means is that every child, a boy or a girl, that is being born to any of the incest, which are many, is a mamzer, and cannot marry an Israeli or an Israelite. And even if they manage to get married somehow to a Jew, their children and their children's children forever would never be able to marry a Jew. So this fate is horrible because there isn't a city in the world that every year there aren't kids that are being born from incest. And we always think of mamzer as a child of a woman that betrayed her husband. This too is a mamzer. If a woman is married to X and is sleeping with Y and he impregnates her and she is having a child, so this child will be a mamzer. But not only this child, all the kids that will be born from all the incest that we know, and the incest in the Bible are more than just getting a child from your father or your brother. It's so. For instance, I'll give an example. Rivka got a call from a client asking her to find out in the rabbinical court what's happening. How can it be? She received a call from the rabbinate that her 4 children are mamzerim. She's a religious woman. Her family is regular family. How come my kids are mamzerim? I never slept with anyone else except my husband. So they told her, yes, but one of the incest is that your husband was married to your sister once. And if your sister is still alive and you have children, so your children are mamzerim. So she told them, but you married me. I got married through the Rabbanut. And they said, yes, it was our mistake. We noticed it now. Just know that your children will not be able to marry. What do you do with this? Go figure. So in this midrash, and this midrash is one of 5 beautiful, amazing midrashim that Rivka wrote about this problem, trying to attack it and offer different solutions that we can use today to change this reality and change the law. And she's doing it in the ways that Chazal did, very similar in different strategies. Maybe one last thing, why today the status of mamzerim in Israel is worse than in the past, because in the past, in different communities of Jewish communities around the world, if there was a mamzer, either from different kind of incest or betrayal of a woman, infidelity, so these children will just leave the city, go somewhere else in the Jewish world. Nobody knows them there, get married there, and there is a status for this in halacha named mishpacha shenitme'a, a family that actually evolved somehow without people knowing. So it can happen. But when a rabbi knows that someone is a mamzer, he is not allowed to marry them. So there were solutions, but today the Rabbanut writes the names of all the mamzerim that she knows, and all the mamzerim that they suspect that they are mamzerim. It's another list, but the mamzerim that they know has hundreds of names on it. People call it the black list because it's the frightening list, and they wouldn't enable any rabbi, of course, to marry those folks, but it's on the computer, so they can send it all around the world for whichever rabbi that is interested to know if he can marry, anyone. So we're stuck in a horrible condition, because also who would like to adopt a kid that he can't marry? It's also a problem for people to agree to adopt these kids. So, and there are other implications that I heard over the years. So let's go back to Rivka's midrash. Rivka mentions a fictional Beit Midrash that appears in her books again and again, in her midrashim. Bruria's Beit Midrash. Bruria is in the Talmud the wife of Rabbi Meir. She was the only woman scholar, serious woman scholar. There are many stories of chochmes, of Torah that not many, few stories about her Torah. And Rashi brings a horrible story, traditional story that darkens her image. But in the Talmud, her image is very interesting and not negative. So Rivka invented this imaginary Beit Midrash, and women study in Beit Midrash of Bruria, and Bruria is the head of the Beit Midrash, and in many of her midrashim, in this Beit Midrash, awful halachic issues that has to do with feminism are being solved. And it's really good ideas. I really recommend reading these solutions and trying to bring those solutions to rabbis today to maybe try to use them. So in the Beit Midrash of Bruria, they stuck a sword. This is an expression that appears in the Talmud when the rabbis demand something or decide something firmly. They stuck a sword and said, halacha, we come up with a new halacha, with new ruling. A mamzer will come into the assembly of God. Mamzerim can join the Jewish people, can marry. So, of course, they're being asked, how come? It's in the verse in Deuteronomy. It says the opposite. Never ever they can join the Jewish people. They read closely and learned. In a place where there is an assembly of God, a mamzer will not come. In a place where with no assembly of God, a mamzer will not come. So you see in the pasuk it says, no mamzer will come into the assembly of God. So she is medayeket. She's putting a finger on a specific term, the way Chazal do, and putting the light on a specific term is turning it in a condition. Only where there is an assembly of God, this ruling is relevant. When there is no assembly of God, there is no problem. So now, of course, what's the next question? The next question is, what is an assembly of God? Where is it? Is there one? And then she explains. They were asked, and where is an assembly of God? And they didn't answer until one of the learned scholars of the Beit Midrash arose and said, I have received from my mother's house that in the assembly of God, ascetics are they, pious are they, righteous are they, and learned are they, and doers of loving kindness too are they, and they dwell beyond the river Sambation. My revered grandmother went from ocean to ocean and compassed all the winds of heaven and never found the assembly of God. They reckoned and concluded in the Beit Midrash, an assembly of God never was, nor was it ever created, but rather it is a parable. And why was it written? Study and search it and receive your reward. You probably know some of the expressions, they're very familiar. So let's see. The women in the Beit Midrash are not sure what assembly of God is, but one of them is saying, I received this tradition from my mother's house. This strategy of mentioning a tradition from one's family is a valid way to rule halachic rulings for Chazal, because these traditions sometimes are stronger than textual study only. So she says, I have this tradition that my grandmother was looking for these pious, perfect people. And she was looking so much all over that she reached the Sambation. The Sambation is this magical river in our tradition that nobody can cross, and beyond the Sambation, the 10 lost tribes are. So this woman searched all over and understood that they do not exist. So what Assembly of God represent is really utopia of totally saintly reality, when people behave perfectly. In these conditions, the highest conditions of all, mamzerim do not join, because maybe there are now mamzerim. I don't know if people behave so wonderfully. So these high standards relate to different reality than ours. In our reality, this is something you can't demand because it's irrelevant. There are so many people are like this. And so they ask her, so how come it's there in the Bible, this demand, if it cannot be used, it cannot, and she gives the answer that the rabbis give when they notice or meet mitzvah that they can't stand, either morally, it looks to them, or a story that looks to them too horrible. So for instance, you must know the mitzvah of ben sorer umoreh, the rebellious child that eats and drinks too much and doesn't obey his parents, and his parents are supposed to take him to the elderly in the gates of the city, and he's being stoned, and the parents have to stone him first. So many of the Tanaim couldn't stand this, or other, the story of Job, for instance. How can so much suffer fall upon someone that doesn't deserve it? So they said on those occasions and others that, this never happened. It's only to teach us morals. And why is it there? Just for the sake of Torah study. But you can't relate to it as something relevant and real and follow it. The Tanaim said this, some of the Amoraim in the Talmud didn't like it, but eventually we see that we don't follow these rulings today, thank God. So the rabbis managed to use the midrashim, the midrashay halacha, to put away some of the things that they didn't feel comfortable with. And in this midrash, Rivka is doing the same for the mamzerim. In other of her midrashim, she's using other vehicles to put them aside that we know from other ways that Chazal did the same, like saying that we're all tmei metim, we're all mamzerim, and other strategies. And she shows, for instance, that Rachel's kids, the two tribes are mamzerim because her husband was married to her older sister. So 1/6 of the Jewish people are mamzerim. And she shows how Moshe, Aaron and Miriam are mamzerim because their mother was the aunt of their uncle, and this is also incest. So she's trying to attack this issue from different ways and at least bring the cry of the people who suffer so much from this today. The last midrash that we're going to read today was written by me, and I brought it because I wanted to share with you that some of the midrashim in Dirshuni are midrashim that are written because they're so needed and they weren't there for us during all the 2,000 years of Jewish text. And the midrash is dealing with Miriam's death. So we know that Moshe's death was a death by kiss, and the rabbis say that Aaron was also died by the kiss on his mouth, and they actually say it even on Miriam, but they said that we can't say it explicitly like this because it's not modest, God doesn't kiss women, which this midrash really hurt me when I learned it. And what does it mean that God kisses men on their lips and not women? Like, it's awkward anyway. And why did I write about the death of Miriam? Because I was supposed to teach a lesson years ago on Parashat Chukat. And in this parasha, there is a long and beautiful description of the death of Aaron. So I prepared a class comparing between the death of Aaron and the death of Moses. Of Moshe, which are really different. Moshe fights until the last moment. In the midrashim, especially, he's not willing to accept death and has a long quarrel with God. And Aaron's death is one of acceptance. Beautiful midrashim on his death. And I had a wonderful class, and when I read Parashat Chukat one last time, I noticed that, whoa, Miriam's death is also mentioned there, but it's only one verse, and so, that I didn't even notice it. So I looked in Chazal, in the rabbinical traditions, which midrashim are written about Miriam's death, and I found only two, the one that I mentioned before, on the death of Kish, but not explicit kiss on the mouth, and one that says that why immediately after her death Israel are seeking for water and crying and threatening Moshe, because there was a magical well that used to roll with Israel in the desert thanks to Miriam, and when Miriam died the well disappears. So I decided that more has to be written about Miriam's death, and I will write the midrash that I wrote about her. And it's a kind of a different model of relating to separation from the world. If Moshe is struggling and fighting, and we know a lot of people from our families or friends that would fight until their last moment, did fight. And we know other people that accept their death and separate and do different ceremonies maybe. This third model will talk about someone that had trauma in her past and is waiting for her death. She knows it's around the corner, and how do people relate to her death? So let's read this story, and you will be able to use it if you want, either for yourself or when you help someone else dying and you think it would help. Or maybe one last thing about this. I used two symbols, two motifs in the Midrash that are considered in our culture feminine images. One is the well, of course, and one is the Levana, is the moon. Because of women's period once a month, the moon is always identified with women. But also there is a midrash in Chulin, in Bavli Chulin, that describes, that tried to explain how you solve the problem on the fourth day when God created the light. There's a verse that says that there was the two great lights, and then they're mentioned as the great light and the lesser light. So at the beginning, the Midrash says the moon and the sun were in the same size, and then the moon, as the Midrash says, went to God and challenged God, can both rule together? And it's really like criticism, either a monotheism or, as I see it, as patriarchy, that always think that the social order has to be like a pyramid with one man on top in the head. And she offers a different kind of social orders. Maybe we can rule together. So God is so angry with her for this challenging his only ruling, and he tells her very painful words: go diminish yourself. So in this midrash, it will echo in Miriam's experience when she and her brother said that they also want to be prophets like Moshe. And then she was talking about, in the same breath, they were also talking about the dark black woman that he took. And she was the only one who was punished, as we all remember. So I'll just read the Midrash, and with this we will end our meeting today. Death by a kiss, Miriam's passing. I will skip this first page, which is the midrash, the traditional midrash that tells how Miriam was kissed differently than her brothers. And here my Midrash begins. Miriam sat alone, as the people were scared of her leprosy, lest it return. And she herself waited for that leprosy to come and destroy her face and take her soul. And what would she do every night at the time that she would come to the well? She would lean down to those very same waters to see if the delicate splendor of her face had dimmed. She wanted to know if the skin pendant on it had been devoured, and her eyes sunk again in their graves. When at that time she would see that the light still flowed from her countenance, that she had asked for forgiveness and been forgiven, she wept for her face, which nobody ever saw or kissed any longer, not her beloved, not her brothers, not her friends. One night, at the time she usually went to the well to check her speculum, the full moon that hung above her appeared to her in the water. Her tears dripped into the well, and the reflections of her face and of the moon mingled one with the other. As she cried, the waters began to recede. She wanted to know what they were up to, and she doubled over the mouth of the well, and her heart sunk, as her image was no longer visible in the water. She strained her eyes into the waters, and the moon rose in them again in all her fullness. The moon trembled in the waters, and her visage hid and revealed itself and seemed like that of her mother, Yocheved. I'll stop just for a second. She has this sort of revelation on the mouth of the well that she and her mother and the moon all mixed together and resemble each other or unite somehow. Miriam's heart rose up as the longing imprisoned in her from the day that her mother had died broke the floodgates of her heart. She wanted to look at her more, sink her head into the well until she felt a mouth kissing her on her lips. Her empty pitcher slipped to the ground and shuddered. So you realize what? She was kissed either by God, I guess by God, and the symbol of her death is the pitcher that shatters. At first light, the one called the morning star, the daughters of Israel, came to fill their pitcher at that same well and found it dry. They said, "Let's call out our sister Miriam to raise the waters, since this well has been given to us in our wanderings only because of her." They said, "Who will go into that tent?" Since they were scared to do so. Tzipporah said, "I will, since after all, this disease infected her because he tried to bring my husband back to me." Remember that the Midrash says that why did Miriam talk about Tzipporah? Because he tried to convince Moshe to take her back after he threw her, kicked her, got divorced from her, I don't know. So Tzipporah takes the risk to go into this scary place of leprosy of her sister-in-law. She found her lying in her bed, draped in a gentle light, her eyes closed and her lips pursed like a baby's. She said, "We will return to you, my sister." She exited and told them. Some say that as they were preparing her body for burial, they wailed over her, "Who is she that shines through like the dawn, beautiful as the moon?" From Song of Songs. And some say they wailed, Oh, let him kiss me, yishakeni, with the kisses of his mouth, from Song of Songs, too. So this is a sort of a tikkun of trying to say that she was kissed appropriately in her death, and she somehow united with her mother, or those sides that she longed to meet again. And what is it that someone that waits for their next cancer coming is something that many of us know. Not easy, but I hope somehow it ends things in a softer way. So thank you for being with me today, and we will meet next time and talk about midrashim written after October 7th.